A note to listeners about this episode. Michael Varga, our storyteller this week, is a cancer survivor. He was diagnosed in 2020 with cancer of the tongue. In surgery, more than half his tongue was removed. So, he speaks slowly and with great care. Still, as you might imagine, some of his words are slurred. Forming words does not come easy for him now. Both Michael and I thought it was important to share these stories in his own voice. Life is ours to be spent, not to be saved. Attributed to D.H. Lawrence.
Iran and Iraq were at war, and so shipping was under threat. And so the U.S. Navy was maintaining its fleet in the Persian Gulf. And they would make liberty calls at the port of Dubai. And it was my job to ride out on a pilot boat to the U.S. Navy ship, climb a rope ladder up the side of the Navy ship in my business suit, carrying a satchel of security materials for the sailors.
So how high up are you off the water?
Very high. I would say from the pilot boat, I had to climb maybe 100 yards. Many times I saw as I'm climbing up that rope ladder, one of these times I'm going to fall in the Persian Gulf.
Nothing has come easy for Michael Varga. In the Peace Corps, he had the toughest assignment in an already difficult country. As a diplomat, he faced huge challenges, and now, in retirement, battling cancer, he is dealing with brutal obstacles. But as an artist, which he also is, he meets the world with unwavering wonder and kindness. In work, as in life, he remains an inspiration. I'm Christopher Wurst, and this is
Soft
Power.
Powerful.
Soft
Powerful.
Powerful stories.
Powerful.
Soft
Powerful. Stories.
I grew up in Philadelphia. I went to an urban high school, which opened my eyes to a wider world. Before then, I had gone to an elementary school that was all white and in the suburbs. But going to an urban high school with African Americans, Chinese, people from other countries, it was really eye-opening for me to have that experience. I came from working class background, and so we didn't have a lot of money. But there was a man in the neighborhood, Mr. Boyce, and he organized a sports league for us to play baseball. And it was a wonderful thing because we didn't have to pay anything. We just showed up and played. And he was really a hero of mine because he was doing this purely as a volunteer. You know, he was just doing it to sort of teach us about life through baseball. From a very early age, I was writing. I'm not sure what started it, but I had a nun in elementary school that liked a story that I wrote, and in third grade, he put me in front of the class to read my story. And that was such a positive experience for me, having my classmates on the edge of their seats waiting to see the end of the story, that taught me that storytelling was really a powerful tool. My parents really believed in books, and we would go to the library every week, my brothers and my sister and my parents, and usually on a Thursday night, we would go to the library, and we children were told we could take 2 books, only 2. That was all you were allowed. but it made you really narrow down which book you really wanted to bring home. In the beginning, I was reading adventure stories and stories about the Hardy Boys, detectives. As I got older, I found stories about other countries more interesting. I found it so interesting that people grew up with a different culture, and that was really appealing to me. But at that early age, I didn't see a place for me in that. What opened my eyes to that possibility was I had a French teacher in high school, and he used to take us to movies in French. And when I would see movies in France or Africa or places around the world, I thought, wow, there's a whole world out there I don't know anything about.
How did Peace Corps come onto your radar?
It was the early 1970s, and the Vietnam War was going on, and there was a military draft at that time. I knew I was not cut out to be a soldier, so I was looking for ways where maybe I wouldn't have to do military service. There was talk in the press that there was a possibility you could avoid military service if you did Peace Corps service. Now, I'm not sure that was ever true, but it was a rumor at that time. And so I began researching Peace Corps. Even when the draft ended, I decided I still wanted to do Peace Corps. When the Peace Corps first accepted me, they sent me a letter saying I was going to teach high school English in Morocco. And so I began researching everything about Morocco. I was an expert on Morocco. But then, a month before I was ready to leave, I got another letter from the Peace Corps saying, oh, we have too many volunteers for Morocco. Since your name is at the end of the alphabet, I'm sorry, you're not going to Morocco. And they gave me a choice of Uganda, the Congo, which was then called Zaire, or Chad. And since I knew the least about Chad, I actually chose Chad. I knew nothing about Chad. I even had to learn that on all the maps that we had at home or in the encyclopedia, you couldn't find Chad because in the encyclopedia it said French Equatorial Africa. So I knew nothing about Chad. I chose Chad because it was not in the news at the time. I thought I was signing up to be part of a group of people all going to work together as young Americans in Africa. And what I found when I got there was that there were certain posts that the Peace Corps felt were too dangerous for particularly women volunteers, but they didn't want to send more than one volunteer there. And so I wound up being sent to a village by myself. And I was not prepared for that. I thought I was going to be with other Americans, but I wound up being by myself with 4,000 Chadians in a small village.
Chad is a landlocked Central African country. Historically, it has faced persistent poverty, political instability, and instability due to regional conflicts. Weak infrastructure, limited access to education and healthcare, and frequent droughts leave much of the population vulnerable.
Looking out from my house, I had a much better house than the Chadians had. Chadians lived in thatched roof huts, made with mud walls. But I had a cement house with a tin roof, so it was pretty good accommodations for Chad. But there was no running water, there was no electricity. For a toilet, I had a hole that I would uncover and do my business and then throw water in the hole inside the house. So that part wasn't great. But looking out from the house, you would see the market where women were lined up in rows selling peanut butter, cassava, any sort of food that was not something that could keep for any length of time. It was something that would spoil rapidly. So that was just outside my house, this row of women. Later, I had a straw fence built around my compound. And so looking out from my house, after the fence was built, you would just see what was going above the fence as it was passing. So I would see Africans carrying things on their heads. And one of the saddest parts was sometimes one of the students would die, and the burial ground wasn't far from my house. So I would see a corpse being carried above my fence to the burial ground.
And can you explain why your students would die?
Well, starvation was a big problem in Chad. Many students really lived on the most minimal caloric intake. They were not eating much at all. So unfortunately, sometimes a student would die of starvation. I would try to be aware when my students were in that dire situation and try to encourage them to come to my house and have a meal with me. But some of the students were too ashamed to admit how hungry they were, and so they wouldn't come to my house.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. If students are in such physical need, they obviously can't be good students, because if their bodies aren't getting any food, their brains aren't working well. Did you switch gears as a teacher and become more of a kind of a friend, or how did you navigate that situation?
Yes, I felt like I had to be more of you might call it a social worker, being aware of the situations my students were facing and try to help them. Many of the students would come to school in the morning from 7 a.m. to 12:30, and then in the afternoon, at the hottest time of the day, they would often have to work in the fields. Peanut and cotton were the two main crops of Chad. And so to earn their rent, they would have to work in the fields. And so it was so hard because they weren't eating and they were not having any time to rest. So I had to really be aware of what they might be going through and try to be as big a help as I could. For many of the people living in that part of Chad, they had never met a white person. So when I would go to the market, for example, a lot of the people didn't know how to react to me. Some children would run away screaming. They were so afraid of me. Some women would bow at me. And I felt, why are you bowing to me? I'm just like you. It was their way of trying to understand who I was, what kind of person I might be. Often when I would be in my house, I would see women from the bush standing at my fence, looking at me. I would be sitting in front of my house, maybe reading a book, and they would be talking, and they'd be pointing at me. And I don't know what they were saying, but I was like I was a zoo animal, you know? But I didn't let it bother me. I understood that I had a role to play in making them aware that Americans were perhaps not something to be afraid of, that we were there to help them, and that we were not there to take from them, to steal from them. That was a big fear among the tribes I lived with. Certain tribes were always fighting each other, and they would attack each other and steal each other's goods. And so there was a suspicion that I would also be some kind of a thief, stealing something from them. When I first arrived in the village, almost everyone in the village came to see me with some problem they wanted me to help them with. Many of them had a piece of paper that came with maybe some medicine, and it was either in English or French or Russian, and they couldn't read it. So they were asking me to read those instructions for them. I could read the French, I could read the English, but I had to tell them, I can't read Russian, I can't help you with that. So in the beginning, I thought that was wonderful, that I was able to help. But then it became so overwhelming. Every day, so many people coming to see me with these things they wanted help with. And so my students said, Michael, you need to build a fence and put a fence around your compound so you can limit the people who can approach you. I didn't like the idea at first, but the students convinced me, and I hired my students to build the fence. So we built the fence, and then the amount of visitors to my house was much reduced, and I was happy about that. But I also knew that by building the fence, I was sending a message to the village that maybe this American didn't want to be part of their African life. He was closing himself off. He didn't want to be involved in their problems. And so my reputation took a downturn. People thought, oh, we don't like having that white man here. He doesn't like us. That was a problem for a while. But one day, a woman started pushing down my fence. And I ran to her and told her, stop pushing down my fence. But I could tell she was speaking in Gumbai, the local tribal language. I could tell she was describing a snake. And she had seen a snake crawl under the fence. And she was warning me, be aware, you have a snake in your compound. I opened the door to the gate and she came in. And we searched all around the compound to try to find a snake. And ultimately we found it by my well. I had a well near my compound for water. And the snake was curled up beside the well. And she was carrying a stick. And she took the stick and with one thrust, she hit the snake in the head and killed it. I was amazed. Here was somebody coming because they thought I was in danger. They didn't know me, but they were willing to come in and help me. And that really said a lot to me.
What happened to the snake?
Well, the snake died, but, the woman, she said, snake meat is good. I said, well, I don't want to eat snakes. She said, oh, you don't know, you don't understand. Snake is good. She asked if she could take the snake home, and she said she would cook it and bring it back. And later she came back to my house with a stew, peanut snake stew, and we ate it together. And so, I just couldn't believe that something dangerous, something perhaps evil, the snake, was now transformed into this meal we were sharing. I didn't rebuild the fence. I had my students tear the fence down. After that, the villagers came again in multitudes asking for help. But I tried to be as helpful as I could to anyone who showed up at my door. And that woman who had warned me about the snake, she had given me a charm to wear around your neck. And she said, Michael, this is for the future. If you wear this, snakes and other evil beings will not come and attack you. So I still have that charm to this day. At the end of every school year, we would have a big exam that students would have to pass to be able to go to university or the next level. My students, in such a difficult situation, dealing with starvation, having to work in the hot sun in the afternoon, my students had the highest percentage of success rate on that exam in all of Chad that year. And I was so happy about that. Peace Corps, the best thing about Peace Corps is that you live on the level of the people around you. I was better off than Chadians, but again, I didn't have running water, I didn't have electricity, I used to have to wash in the river like the Chadians, and that was really important for me understanding the Chadian point of view. When you're a diplomat, you're not as close to the people. You're removed. You have conversations with people, but you're not living on the same level as them. And that makes a big difference in your understanding of the local customs and people.
Would you say that there's a through line between your time as a Peace Corps volunteer and your diplomatic career, things that you took with you?
One of the first times I was teaching in Chad, two boys in the classroom started talking while I'm giving the lesson. So, raised in America, what do you do as a teacher when students are talking? You separate them. So I told them, you sit over there, you sit over there. They didn't move. I didn't understand this insolence. Move, move. They're not moving. I continued the lesson. They stopped talking, but I continued the lesson. After class, one of the students came up to me and said, Mr. Michael, do you know why they didn't move? I said, no, I don't. He said, you were asking a member of the Mboom tribe to sit with the Laka tribe, and they were not going to sit in different tribal groups. They all sit in the classroom in their tribal groups. To me, it was a sea of Chadian faces. I didn't know they were sitting in tribes in my classroom, but I took that experience and I've used that again and again in my diplomatic career. When I'm sitting across the table from an interlocutor and I have to negotiate something, I have to remind myself, Michael, you may not know what you're seeing across the table. Be aware, be open.
Following the Peace Corps, Michael joined the U.S. State Department as a Foreign Service officer. His title changed, but his demeanor stayed the same.
Because I had Iranians lining up every day outside the consulate, I had my guards control who had access to the consulate. Any American citizen, they have to show their passport, and then they can come into the consulate to see me. One day, a boy of 17 years old appears at my visa window, and I say, who is this? What is he doing here? Well, it turns out this boy had an Iranian father and an American mother, and he had been living in Iran. And at 17 years old, Iran was about to send him to the war. So he had escaped from Iran in a boat across the Persian Gulf. He had to lie flat underneath some stuff, so if the boat were inspected, no one would find him. And he came to Dubai, and he came to the consulate. To this day, I don't know how he was able to convince the guards to let him come to my visa window, because he did not have his American passport. His American passport was in a safe deposit box in Zurich, Switzerland, so he had no proof that he was an American. I sent a cable to Zurich, Switzerland, to have them confirm that he was an American citizen. That was going to take a couple of days. Well, I said to the Consul General, this boy has no money. He showed up in Dubai in a boat. What can we do? He said, well, the U.S. government is willing to lend him some money to fly home to America once we confirm he's an American. But for now, we have to wait for confirmation that he's American. I said, but he has no money. What are we going to do? The consul general said, lay your hands away, Michael. This is not your problem. It's his problem. I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. So I had a 2-bedroom apartment in a high-rise in Dubai. So I told the boy, I said, I'm going to let you stay in my extra bedroom until we get confirmation that you're an American. I took him home with me. I fed him. I gave him some money. I included him in my activities until we got the table from Zurich confirming that he was an American. Ultimately, the U.S. government lent him money for a plane fare home to America, and to this day, I'm still in touch with him, even now. And he still thinks of how lucky he was to be able to get past that visa line and see me at the consulate in Dubai.
Wait, is it that time already? We're nearing the end of the episode. But before we go, I want to give Michael the chance to answer a question from Dubious on Deb.
If you want to travel, great. Go for it. But why does the government need to pay for you to go to the middle of nowhere?
I say to this aunt that those students in my village in Chad have never forgotten the experience of having me as their teacher. That's not my ego talking. It was their introduction to what an American person is like. And so they have carried that for the rest of their lives, an appreciation of our country because of that personal experience with a living American in their village. In the same way, I say to that aunt, look at that boy, that American who showed up at the consulate in Dubai, escaping from Iran. If I had not been there to help him, who knows what would have happened? Might he have gone to the war, Iran-Iraq war, and lost his life? But instead of that outcome, he's lived a productive life as an American citizen. And that's because I was there to help him. A civil war broke out in Chad, and we had to be evacuated. And during the evacuation, we were transported in a convoy to Cameroon, the country to the west of Chad. That was many hours in the back of a truck, all of us Peace Corps volunteers in the convoy. And so I had time to think about the Michael who arrived and the Michael that was now leaving Chad. And the funny thing is, Chris, when I first arrived in Chad, they had us read the site reports of the various assignments. And when I met with the director, I told him, I'll go to any place except Barbican. I think that would be too hard for me. Well, oddly enough, he wound up sending me to Barbican, the one place I said I didn't want to go. That's where they sent me. And what that taught me was that I was much stronger as a person, and my own skills were better than I thought myself. And so for the rest of my life, I often think when I'm confronted with something or like, with cancer, I say to myself, okay, Michael, you dealt with such hardship in Chad. You survived that. You thrived. You can beat this. Maybe not beat cancer, but you can battle it, fight it.
Huge thanks to Michael for his willingness and his insistence that he tell his stories himself. After a 1970s stint as a Peace Corps volunteer in Chad, Michael Varga became a U.S. diplomat, primarily serving in the Middle East. He holds a master's degree in economics from Notre Dame and a BA in English from Rider University. Michael is a playwright and actor as well as a writer of fiction. His Peace Corps novel, Under Chad's Spell, is available on Amazon. 3 of his plays have been produced. Collapsing into Zimbabwe, a short story, earned him first prize in a competition held by the Toronto Star. Another short story, Chad Erupts in Strife, won the Glimmer Train Fiction Open in 2015. His columns have appeared in many newspapers and journals. For more about Michael and his works, check out michaelvarga.com. Thanks again for listening. We appreciate your support. We appreciate your feedback. Remember, you can always go to www.softpowerfulstories.org to give us feedback, to check out more on the guests, to see photos of their time from service. It's a good place to go. As always, we appreciate your likes and your shares and your follows and your reviews. All of these things are extremely important to growing a podcast and to helping us find the ears that we would really like to share these stories with. I want to thank my friend Kate Furby for her amazing logo, my friend Kathy Zilski for voicing Dubious Aunt Deb, even though she's nothing like Dubious Aunt Deb, not even a little bit. My name is Christopher Wurst. I'm the host and producer of Soft Powerful Stories. Until next time.